What's up, mobile devs? I hope you're doing well. In this tutorial, we are going to recreate together from scratch this beautiful split button animation. We are mainly going to use Reanimated, so you can see that we are animating the width, we are animating the opacity, and we are animating also the background color. But if you look closely, you can see that while tapping on the button, on these buttons, the buttons are rescaling, and because of that we are going to create a custom tap gesture by using React Native gesture handler. So before moving on, let me also say that this animation is deeply inspired by Miles Running Tracker, which is an app available on the App Store. And let's say, of course, just to be clear, I mean, this tutorial is not sponsored at all by Miles. I just think that this app is outstanding. The bad news is that, the sad news at least, is that this app has been made with SwiftUI, which also means that there is a lot of room for myself to prove to Miles Vincent that he made the wrong decision. And let's say, in the past, I also made a very similar split button animation for an app called Steady, and this app has been made with React Native, which is a huge plus, of course. And last but not least, if you're really curious about React Native animations and want to learn more, don't forget to check out my online course at reanimated.dev. So this course is designed to guide you from the basics of React Native animations to advanced techniques. And let's say the best way to achieve that, in my opinion, is to always recreate something from scratch. Because of that, my tutorials are going to feel just a bit slow, but hopefully they are also going to be very helpful. So this course is definitely built on top of animations, and we are going to explore how Reanimated works, how to unlock the full potential of gesture handler, and how to build stunning visual effects with React Native Skia. So no worries at all, because if you want to support me, subscribing to my YouTube channel is definitely more than enough. And that said, let's finally get our hands dirty and let's finally move on to the code part. So here, as you can see, we have our default React Native project initialized with Expo. And I've just installed Reanimated and React Native gesture handler. So it's pretty obvious that we are going to need Reanimated to animate things all over the place. It's a bit less obvious why do we actually need a React Native gesture handler, but we are going to see in a while why it's going to be important. Then, this is totally optional, I've also added the Expo font, and that's because we are going to use a custom font for this, let's say for this demo. So as you can see here, we have this stop label, we have the resume and the finish labels, and all of them are using a custom mono font. And because of that, let's say in the assets, I've added this Fira code regular, which is a mono font. So as mentioned previously, that's totally optional, so feel free to avoid that. And let's say in the app.tsx, I've also added the, let's say the Expo font loading function in order to preload the font before using the app. So last but not least, I've just created this palette object, which I also need to export, honestly. And these are going to be the colors that we are going to use for this animation. So in detail, you can see that this one is going to be the background color. This one is going to be the card color. And this one is going to be the highlight color. And that's it. So maybe it is worth to add also the text color, which is going to be just white. So that said, let's move forward and let's start actually to get rid of this text. And let's start also to update the container to use the palette.background. So here, let's fix the status bar. So to this point, we can already start creating the component. So the component is going to be a bit complex, and because of that, it's worth to create a components folder. And here, I'm going to name the component SplitButton.tsx. So for now, let's just create a simple React, actually, let's create a simple React functional component, which is going to return a React Native view. And here, let's export this split button, and let's import it over there. So let's say, what do we actually need? So let's think about the properties that we want to add to this component. First of all, let's say for sure we want to know if this component has been splitted or not. So just to fully visualize here what I'm talking about, when we are in this state, the component is not splitted, but if we tap on stop, you can see that we have reached the splitted state. So we want to keep track of this thing while dealing with the UI. So because of that, let's add a splitted property. Then let's say if you look closely, we have 3 different actions. The first action is the stop action. So we are going to call it main. And then we have the resume and the finish. So to keep things a bit more general, instead of calling resume action and finish action, let's define here the main action, the left action, and the right action. So let's start to create here the main action. So the main action is going to be to contain a label and a callback. So here the label, for instance, for the main action is going to be stop, and the callback is going to be the onStop callback. So the onPress callback right there. And then for each action, we also want to pass a color, a background color that we are going to use later. So let's define here the background color as a string. So here we also need a left action, which is going to have the same property, and a right action. So instead of duplicate everything over there, let's just create the type split action, and let's define it with label, onPress, and background color. And here, let's just redefine everything in this way. So that said, we can pass these properties to the React functional component, and we can, let's say, retrieve them over there. So the first thing that I want to do, honestly, is to build this stop action without caring about the split, the left action, and the right action. So because of that, let's try to update this view. And let's say this one is going to be the container of our buttons in general. So let's say that we want to take the full width. Let's add the background color equal to red, and let's add an height equal to 60. I want just to see something. So that's fine, that's totally fine. Maybe 70 or maybe 60 is fine. And here, right there, let's create another view. So this one is going to be actually the button that we want to use. So this one is going to take all the available space. So actually, let's just define a width equal to 100% for now. Let's say that the background color is going to be equal to the main action.background color. And here TypeScript is complaining. And instead, and let's also pass here text. And the main action, let's say the text is going to be main action.label. So let's import text from React Native. So of course here React Native is definitely complaining, and that's because we need to add the main action, the left action, and all the other properties. So as mentioned previously, the main action is going to be stop. The onPress callback is going just to log something like console log stop. Then we need the left action. Actually, we also need the background color here. So the background color for the stop action is going to be this one, which is palette.card, as I've defined previously. Then we are going to have the left action. So the left action is going to be resume. So resume with the same color. So let's say label resume, onPress, and the background color is going to be card as well. And then we have the right action, which is going to be finish. We are just going to log finish, and we are going to use the highlight color. So here the TypeScript is still complaining because we need to pass the split property. So for now, the initial splitted property is going to be false because we are just concerned about this button over there. let's say that said, of course, something is going on over there, but let's say that's, of course, not enough. We need to fix the height, which is going to be 60. And we need to center the label. We need to center by using justify content center and align item center. And then we need to define here the style for the label, which is going to be, let's say, font size equal to 16. The color is going to be palette.text. And here we also want to use the font family. And as mentioned previously, I've defined the Fira code regular, which is actually imported, let's say, as mentioned previously at the beginning of this tutorial, I'm just importing this Fira code regular, which is a mono font. And by adding it, you can see that we have definitely changed the style. And since the, let's say, since everything here is always in lowercase, let's apply the, let's say, text transform property, lowercase. So we still need to do a lot of things over there, but before doing all of these things, let me just refactor a bit this code right there, and let's define the styles. So let's say styles equal to style sheet. So let's say create, and here let's define the label. So almost all the labels are going to use these properties, so the font size. So here let's get rid of the styles and let's use styles.label. And here let's define the button, which will have these properties right there. So of course the color is going to be different for each one. And let's say styles.button. So we still need to fix, of course, the style for this button. And the first thing that I want to do is that I want to add some sort of padding horizontal, let's say equal to 20. And I want to add to the button some border radius, and let's say something like 15, maybe 30. Let's say maybe 30 is too much, or maybe it's nice. So let's actually get rid of this red color. Yeah, maybe it is nice. And finally, let's say this is going to be a subtle change, honestly, but let's say you can see that something really small is changing with this border radius by adding this border curve continuous, which is a property that is just valid on iOS. So let's say that said, everything seems fine. Since we are using this height there, and we are also using 60 over there, let's define here the button height, which is going to be 60, and let's reuse it there and there. So let's say that said, of course, we are handling properly this main action, but we are not handling at all the animation. So how can we handle the animation? First of all, let's try to focus on the next scenario, which is the splitted state. So the case where splitted is set to true. So let's enable splitted, and here let's define a second view. So we want actually to show the second view just if splitted is enabled. And here Copilot is reading into my mind, and it is adding the left action, the styles button, and the left action.label. And you can see that somehow everything is almost working properly, but we need to add the flex direction equal to row. And everything seems almost right. What do we need to fix? We, of course, need to remove this width equal to 100 from the equal to 100% from the button styles. So how can we deal with that? So let's say let's actually define the main button width, which is going to change. Let's say if it is splitted, we want that the main button, which is the stop button, is going to have the width equal to the 50%. Otherwise, we want to use 100%. And then for the left button width, if it is splitted, we want to take the 50%, otherwise it should be with a width equal to 0. So let's try to use these properties, and let's say, actually let's say here width equal to left button width, because this is the left button. And there, let's use the width equal to main button width, and let's get rid, of course, of the width from the button. And somehow here things are starting to look great. So if we set the splitted property equal to false, you can see that it is somehow working nicely. If it is equal to true, it is almost perfect, but we still need to add, let's say, some sort of gap. And let's try to use false, true, and it is somehow looking great. So instead of adding this gap, let me try to add, actually, instead of, let's add this gap, and instead of using the percentages, the best thing to do probably is to use numeric values to animate things easily. So let's say we want to use the same identical logic, but instead of using the percentage and the percentage, we are going to use numeric values. And that's because if you look closely while adding the gap, you can see that the percentages are not, let's say the percentages are working as expected, but that's not fine for our use case. So let's set back the gap equal to 0. Let's try to get the window width. So this is going to be the window width. Let's say let's try to define the button, let's say default the splitted button width, which is going to be equal to the window width divided by 2 for now. And let's say that the splitted, so the left button width is going to be equal to splitted button width. Here splitted button width, otherwise splitted button width multiplied by 2. So here somehow everything seems almost fine, but we need to take care of the padding horizontal. So here we are considering the splitted button width as the total window width divided by 2, but we need to define there the padding horizontal equal to 20. We need to take the padding horizontal into account right there. So let's say padding horizontal, and you can see that everything seems working nicely. So we want to take into account the gap. So let's say gap equal to 10. And let's add the gap over there. And here we can finally add the gap, and you can see that the styling is looking, let's say it's working perfectly. Honestly, that's a bit cumbersome and we need to define these values right there, but we have a lot of control over the values that we are using. So here, instead of using 0%, let's just use 0. So let's say, of course, we don't want to toggle and enable this property by updating ourselves the value. We want to use a state, and we want to update the state while tapping on these actions. So how can we do that? We can just define the useState. By default, the splitted property is going to be false. So let's say splitted, set splitted, and let's say let's pass it over there. So if we tap on the stop, we want to set splitted equal to true. If we tap on resume, let's say if we tap on resume, we want to set splitted equal to false. And let's just do this thing for now. So let's use splitted right there. And if we try to tap over the stop button, nothing is happening. And that's just because we didn't bind the onPress functions to the views. So later we are actually going to use a button, but for now let's just use the onTouchEnd property. And for the main action, we just want to call onTouchEnd the main action.onPress, and you can see that it is working nicely. And for the left button, we want to use the left action onPress, and you can see that everything is working nicely. So let's say, of course, here we don't want to see the stop button. We want to see a different background color, and we want to see a different labels. But for now, let's just focus on building this initial animation. So honestly, that's definitely not enough. Because of course, after tapping, we want to see some sort of animation. And since we want to deal with an animation, the first thing that we need to do is that we want to convert all these views into animated views. So let's start to do that. So let's import animated from React Native Reanimated. This is critical. So let's convert this left view into an animated view, and this right view, so the main view, into an animated view. So once we have done that, we need to handle somehow this reanimated style. So this animated style. So for now, we don't have really an animated style, but we want actually to add some additional styling, especially for this width, and we want to animate the width for both these views. So here, let's define the reanimated left style, left button style. And we are going to use the use animated style hook from Reanimated. And here we are going to return a style with this width that we have evaluated over there. So let's copy this condition. Actually, let's just copy this left button width. And here we need to take care of the dependencies. So as you can see, we are this styling is depending on the splitted property, on the splitted state, and because of that, we need to add the splitted state inside this dependency array. Then we need to define the reanimated main button style, and here we are going to have the identical condition. We have just copied the main button width, and we are using the splitted condition, and everything is almost identical to what we were doing previously. And instead of passing the width property in this specific way, let's just pass the reanimated left button style and the reanimated main button style. And if we tap over there, you can see that we are back to the, let's say, the initial step. But the beauty is that since we are using a use animated style hook and we have two animated views, we can apply here the with timing function. So let's import with timing from Reanimated, and we can drop this value that we have over there. And after tapping, you can see that somehow let's say we are already seeing some sort of animation. Of course, nothing is working perfectly at the first glance, but let's say that's definitely a good start. So let's see, first of all, the two issues that we have. The first one is, of course, this stop button is not working as we are expecting, because let's say this resume button is disappearing instantly. So if you look closely, if I tap on the resume button, the resume isn't shrinking itself properly. It is just disappearing, and therefore the stop button is starting the animation right from the left side, and that's definitely not correct. The second issue is that the resume label is just, let's say, is defined on multiple lines, and that's definitely not good. So first of all, why the resume is disappearing instantly? That's because we are wrapping this animated view with this splitted condition. So the trick is that we don't want to erase, to unmount totally the resume button. We want actually to keep the resume button, but we want to have a width equal to 0. So the let's say the resume button is going to disappear instantly. And as you can see, the animation is much smoother. The resume button hasn't been unmounted, honestly. It is still there, but the width is equal to 0, so it doesn't really matter. And the second thing that we want to deal with is that this resume label, as you can see, is just while the view is shrinking, you can see that it is defined on multiple lines. That's just not fine, but we can definitely fix that by using the number of lines property equal to 1. And here it seems that this is not enough. So let's say somehow this is working. We are using one line, but we have the 3 dots. If you look closely, we have the 3 dots while closing the width. Honestly, that's somehow expected, but we can deal with it by just using an opacity animation while, let's say, while handling the collapse animation. So let's say if the left button, let's say if we are in the splitted state, we can set the left button with an opacity equal to 1. Otherwise, it's going to be 0. And let's just add again the with timing transition. And here you can see that things are definitely better. So if you are picky, let's say you can still see somehow in the last few frames the 3 dots. But because of that, we can create another, let's say another animated style, and we can apply a faster transition, faster timing transition to the text opacity. So let's see that concretely, practically. So let's define the reanimated left text style. We are going to have an animated style. We are going to have the splitted, we are going to depend on the splitted state, and we are just going to have the opacity animation. Then we have this reanimated left text style, and we have this text. As previously, let's say, as mentioned previously, if you want to animate things, you need to have animated components. So let's use the animated text instead of the common React Native text. And here, let's just add this reanimate left text style. So if we reload, somehow almost nothing is changing. But the truth is that since we have decoupled the two opacity animations, here for the text style, we can add a faster transition. So instead of the default duration, we can use some sort of 150 milliseconds. And let's reload again. And you can see that let's say we don't have anymore the 3 dots issue. So let's say that said, that's definitely fine for the for this transition. So before dealing with the let's say the background color animation, I just noticed that actually here the stop button is not centered. So as you can see, this styling is correct, but this one is not correct because the padding that is right there is greater than the total padding, and that's because of the gap property that we have over there. So instead of using the gap property, let's add, so let's try to reload to see what's going on. So here, let's say we need to add this gap over there, but the point is that the gap will always be there. So the gap in theory is there just if we have more than one item. So in this specific condition, it shouldn't be there, but actually as mentioned previously, here we don't have one item, we have two different items because we have this one, which is not unmounted, and we have this one, which is, let's say, not unmounted as well. So here the gap property is applied, and let's actually try to add this splitted condition. So let's say we want to apply the gap just if the splitted, if the component is splitted, otherwise we don't want to. And let's say it is somehow working, but there is some sort of jumped transition, glitched transition. So instead of applying the gap here, let's try to add some sort of left margin left property to this main button style. So let's say margin left, and we want that, let's say, if it is splitted, we want to add the gap, otherwise it should be 0. And here we can add the with timing property. So let's reload. And you can see that everything is working smoothly. So let's say that mentioned, that said, let's finally focus on the background color animation. So as you can see, we actually have 3 different actions: the main action, the left action, and the right action. But after all, the main action and the right action at some point become the same identical thing. So animating the background color of the right action is nothing more than animating the pre-existing main button that we already have. So because of that, let's say we actually want to animate this main button style. We just want to animate this main button style background color. So to make sure that everything is going to work right, to work properly, let's just ensure that we remove the background color, the fixed background color that we have defined over there, because we are going to move the background color animation, the background color styling inside this animated style. And here we want that if it is splitted, we don't want to use the main background color, but we want to use the right action background color. Otherwise, we are going to use the main action background color. And here, let's say we can see that somehow things are working properly. And there is one very interesting trick. So let's say colors are after all just strings, but if you think closely about colors, they are just hex values, or in the specific case of the RGBA color, they are just numeric values that are interpolated. And fortunately, Reanimated is stealing this interpolation of colors under the hood. And because of that, since the colors are treated as numeric values, we can apply as well the width timing by order function. And we can have for free this amazing background color animation. So last but not least, let's say, of course, it's not just about the background color, it's also about the text. And if you look closely for this, let's say, for this demo, we have this, let's say, this stop label is somehow converting itself to be a finish label. But the trick is that actually we are not updating the text. We always have both these two texts over there. We are just animating their opacity. So you can see that we have the stop label and we have the finish label. And the stop label is just disappearing. So even though the two buttons are the same button, you can definitely say that the two labels are different labels. So the main label is different from the right label. So that said, let's define first of all this reanimated. Actually, instead of defining the styles, let's just focus on recreating the second label. So we are going to have at the same time two different labels. This is going to be the right action label. And there, let's say for the styles.label, let's use a position absolute. And let's say it looks really weird, but that's the trick. And since we are going to animate the opacity of both labels, let's just convert both of them into animated text. And let's define here the the reanimated main text style, which is going to be the stop label. And we know that, let's say, it will depend on split. And if the, let's say, if the view is splitted, the opacity is going to be, let's say, if the view is splitted, the opacity is going to be 0, because the main button will be converted into the right button. And here we have the reanimated right text style. So it will use an animated style as well. And here, let's say we have the opposite condition. So if it is splitted, we are going to see the right text style. So let's copy both of these styles and let's add them over there. So let's say reanimated left text style, but for this one, let's use the reanimated main text style. And as you can see, somehow the animation is working properly. But of course, let's say we want to apply our lovely width timing transition on both of them. So actually, something is wrong over there. So instead of the reanimated left text style, let's apply the reanimated right text style. So honestly, both are identical, but I mean, let's just differentiate both of them. And you can see that the animation is working perfectly. So let's say we need to handle a couple of things yet. So just to visualize things practically, let's add some console logs over there. Let's add the resume console log and the finish console log. So if we tap on the stop button, we want to log the stop. We want to call the stop callback. If we tap on the resume, we want to fire the resume. And if we tap on the finish callback, we want to fire the unfinished callback. But after all, you can see that we are never logging the finish button. We are always logging the stop callback. So the stop string. So how can we deal with it? The point is that in the onTouch end for the main action, we are always passing the main action callback. But the truth is that if it is splitted, we just want to pass the right action on press callback. And finally, you can see that we are definitely firing the finish label, the console log finish, and let's just split things also there. And that's working properly. So let's say to this point, everything looks perfect, but let's say if you look closely this demo over there, we are missing a small thing. So for now, we are just using the onTouch end property to handle the onPress gesture, but we want to use some sort of fancy button. And if you look closely, let's say you can see that while tapping, we are updating the scale of the view. So to handle that, we definitely need to create a custom tap gesture. And that's basically the whole point of installing since the beginning the React Native Gesture Handler package. So usually for handling this specific tap gesture, I love to create custom components. And in this specific case, we are going to create a custom pressable scale. So I'm going to, let's say I'm going to write code a bit, let's say a bit faster. And that's just because I've already created in the past a tutorial about how to create custom tap gestures in React Native. So let's create a custom component. We are going to call this one PressableScale. And we are going to create this, let's say we are going to define the PressableScale by just returning a view. The PressableScale is going to be a button, and it will accept, of course, a children. It will have an onPress callback that will be optional. Honestly, it doesn't have to be optional. Then we are going to have some styles if we want to. So let's say style prop, view style. And here, let's access these React functional typings. And let's say PressableScale props. So I should use a snippet, I know that. But I always like to write things from scratch. And here, let's export this PressableScale. And let's say, what do we want to do? We want to animate this view because we are going to animate the scale of this view. So let's use an animated view by importing animated from Reanimated. And here we want to use a custom gesture. And because of that, let's use the gesture detector from React Native Gesture Handler. So inside of this animated view, we are going just to place the children. And here, let's return the gesture detector. So let's say here, nothing is working, no worries. But first of all, let's say you can see that TypeScript is complaining because we are not passing the gesture property. So let's quickly fix that by introducing the gesture property. We can import gesture from React Native Gesture Handler. So you can see it there. We want to create a custom tap gesture. So let's say after the dot, we have multiple options. In our specific case, we want to handle a custom button. So let's use the tap. And here we want to handle the onTouch down callback. We want to handle the onTouch up callback. So when the finger is released. And let's say for now, that's fine. So let's pass this gesture over there. And let's just get back to, let's also pass the custom style to this animated view. So we are actually passing this style over there. And let's get back to our split button and let's replace this animated view with our pressable scale. So let's say animated view with pressable scale. Instead of the onTouch end property, let's pass the onPress callback. And let's do the same for this left action. And let's say onPress. So here, if we reload, you can see that nothing is working. And that's because, let's say, we are not handling the onPress callback at all inside this, custom tab gesture. So here, the idea is that when we release the finger, we want to fire the onPress callback. But the truth is that if we try to do that, everything is going to crash. And that's because the onTouch SAP is going to be fired on the UI thread, and the onPress callback instead is a JavaScript function that is going to be fired on the JavaScript thread. And we cannot we cannot call JavaScript callback from the native thread. So to handle that, fortunately, Reanimated provides us this run on JS utility function, which is helpful to call asynchronously the JavaScript callback from the main thread, from the UI thread. So let's wrap this onPress callback with run on JS, and let's try to run again the demo. So I know, let's say that this concept is a bit more complex to understand. So here, let's see if it is going to work. But as mentioned previously, you can find already a pretty detailed tutorial just about creating custom tab gestures in React Native on my channel. And here you can see that let's say the onPress function is working properly. So to be honest, so far nothing has changed. We still need to create and to handle the scale animation. So how can we handle the scale animation? Let's create a scale shared value, which is going to be 1 by default. Let's create a reanimated button style. And we are going to use the use animated style hook from Reanimated. And let's say we are just going to pass this transform by passing just the scale. And here, let's say if we try to do again the same test, nothing is going to change because that's true that we are passing the scale, but by default, the scale is going to be 1. So if we set the scale equal to 0.8, you can see that the scale property is definitely has definitely been applied. So what do we want to do? We want that when we tap on the let's say when we start tapping on the button, we want to animate the scale down. So let's say instead of 1, we want to animate down the scale to 0.9. And you can see that somehow this is working. And let's use a with timing, let's say a with timing high order function. And when we release the finger, we want to, let's say we want to convert back the scale value to 1. And here you can see that somehow it is working. However, let's say the hard truth is that if we do something like that, so we tap for some more seconds and then we want to cancel the gesture, the onTouch SAP is never going to be fired. So because of that, instead of, let's say, instead of handling the reset transition right there, let's use the unfinalized callback, which is going to be fired no matter what at the end of the transitions. So actually, you can see that by doing that, everything is working perfectly. There is still one very minor thing, and the truth is that, let's say, by default, the max tap duration is really, really small. So you can see that if I tap for more than 2 seconds, the gesture is automatically cancelled. So you can see that we have the onTouch cancelled callback. So you can see that the gesture is automatically failing instantly. And let's say to avoid this issue, we can just increase the max duration to something like 10 seconds, so 10,000 milliseconds. And you can see that everything is working perfectly. So let's say this tutorial is very fancy, to be honest. It looks easier than it actually is, but there are a ton of things going on under the hood. So I really hope that you enjoy this tutorial. I really hope that you are going to use also this split button in your apps. And let me know if you have some feedbacks in the section below. So if you want to support me, of course, feel totally free to subscribe to the channel. Or if you want, you can definitely support me by, let's say, supporting me on Patreon or on reanimated.dev. So thanks a lot for watching the video and see you to the next one.